I don't remember how I managed to stay standing. I guess muscle memory took over when my knees nearly buckled beneath me. "Effective immediately," Brandon said, sliding a folder across his glass desk with the kind of detachment you'd reserve for ordering lunch. That folder contained my severance package, NDA, and a bullet point summary of my release conditions. 5 years. That was what it all came down to. 5 years of building, troubleshooting, innovating, sacrificing sleep and social life for this startup, all reduced to a 5-page PDF. "I appreciate your contributions, Felix," he added, not looking up. "But this is just business. We're moving in a new direction." New direction? That direction apparently didn't include the guy who wrote 90% of the core code base and designed the proprietary compression protocol that made our platform 10 times faster than anything else on the market. I stood there, unsure if I should laugh or scream. Instead, I just nodded. Understood. Professional to the end. That's what they always say. As I left the office, I noticed Brandon's new assistant, a recent Wharton grad named Maya, barely glanced up from her screen. The message had been sent. I was out, and no one was supposed to care. I walked past the bullpen, where a dozen engineers tapped away at keyboards, oblivious. I had onboarded half of them myself. Some were working on modules I'd architected. Their code ran because mine allowed it to. Zane, our newest back-end hire, looked up. "Hey, Felix, heading out early?" "Something like that," I replied, forcing a smile. I packed my things. Just the essentials. The desk plant I kept alive through more Red Bull spills than I could count. A framed photo of my nephew Max, and the old ceramic mug with the fading binary print. One canvas tote. That's all 5 years amounted to. As I waited for the elevator, I felt a strange chill, like I was walking away from something that hadn't finished with me yet. Brandon's final words echoed in my mind. Just business. But that wasn't it. There was more. Something deeper. I hadn't just been cut loose. I'd been erased. But they didn't know. They didn't know that the documentation Brandon kept insisting I'd get around to was still half complete. They didn't know that the version control structure was tailored to my workflow. Obscure file references, internal notes only I understood, nested functions that would appear random unless you knew what they were doing. They didn't know that the codebase, while technically accessible, was practically unusable without my guidance, and most importantly, they didn't know that I saw it coming. 3 weeks ago, when the meeting shifted behind closed doors, and Brandon suddenly started inviting that specialist, Reese, to engineering reviews, I knew the axe was being sharpened. So I prepared. Every proprietary component I built had a mirrored version, on a personal Git repo, marked private, time-stamped, and legal. I consulted with my attorney, Tessa Kraus, to ensure every bit of it was protected under the clause in my employment contract that specified independent intellectual property developed prior to employment remains the sole ownership of the employee. Because what Brandon never cared to learn was that I began building the compression protocol 2 years before I even joined Voltage, the one that landed us our $10 million Series A. The investors didn't know my name. Brandon made sure of that, but he made a mistake. He thought removing me was the end of the story. He had no idea it was the beginning. The next morning, I didn't wake up to Slack notifications. No fire drills, no morning huddles, no requests for urgent patches. I slept in, made French press coffee, ate eggs without scarfing them down over a keyboard. Then I opened my laptop and read the email I'd drafted 2 nights earlier. I didn't send it. Not yet. It was a message to Voltage's board of advisors outlining the truth. How the system worked, who built it, and what would happen if they didn't fix the upcoming version correctly. But it wasn't time to hit send, let them run blind for a little while. Instead, I called Tessa. They pulled the trigger, I said. No surprises there, she replied. You want to go nuclear yet? Not yet, but I want to be ready. Then you'll like what I found. She'd done some digging. Turns out Brandon had pitched our platform to the investors not as a team effort, but as a solo vision. His vision. Claimed the compression tech was a collaborative development under his leadership. Funny. The only thing Brandon ever led was a meeting to change the brand font. I chuckled. Let them keep talking. I'll be here. 1 week after I left, I was sitting in my favorite cafe, watching the ocean tide from a hilltop view, when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered. Felix? It's Zane, the new back-end hire. Hey man, everything okay? I asked, keeping my voice even. Not really. Reese is, well, he's trying, but the system's buckling. No one can figure out how to integrate the caching layer without triggering dependency errors, and the compression module won't load under the new kernel. We've rolled back twice. I took a long sip of my cold brew. Sounds rough, I said. Yeah, look, I know they didn't treat you right, but if you'd be open to consulting, I could talk to Joseph, the VP. They're desperate. Desperate was interesting. Tell Joseph to email Tessa, I said. My legal representative? She'll handle it. Got it. And Felix? Yeah? We miss you, man. It's not the same without you. That part, oddly, hurt more than I expected. But this wasn't about friendship anymore. This was about principles, and I was just getting started. 3 days after Zane's call, Tessa forwarded me an email from Joseph, the VP of Engineering. The subject line was desperate enough. Urgent. Request for consultation regarding compression framework stability. She replied on my behalf, quoting a consulting fee 3 times my old monthly salary, payable upfront, non-negotiable. Within an hour, Joseph responded, Let me run this by Brandon and the board. They were scrambling, exactly as I predicted. Later that night, I received a message from someone unexpected. Leah, the product manager I used to work closely with. Felix, just wanted to say I'm sorry. We all know the real reason the platform even exists is because of your work. Reese keeps blaming your documentation gaps, but it's clear none of us understand what you actually built. People are scared, customers are pissed. Just thought you should know. I stared at that message for a long time. It wasn't that I needed validation. I already knew my worth. It was that the entire team, the real ones doing the work, were now suffering because Brandon thought he could replace a human foundation with a corporate mirage. Still, I wasn't ready to ride in and save the day. Not yet. The next morning, I checked VoltEdge's public status page. System degradation warnings. 2 modules in partial outage mode. Reddit threads were surfacing in dev forums with users speculating about a failed architecture update. One user posted, I'm 99% sure they fired the only person who knew how the cache sync layer worked. Whoever did it left some serious digital fingerprints. That made me laugh out loud. At noon, Tessa called. Guess what I got? Tell me. A very apologetic call from VoltEdge Legal asking if we'd consider a short-term license agreement for your original compression framework. No consulting, just tech access. I shook my head. No deal. You sure? They sound scared. I want to see how scared they can really get. On day 11, post-firing, the media got wind. TechWire ran a short piece. VoltEdge platform falters after funding round. Source hints at missing architect. The article quoted an anonymous engineer from within VoltEdge. My money was on Ethan, the junior I mentored. He always looked like he was about to confess something. By this point, customer retention numbers were slipping. Their investor portal had gone into lockdown mode. And then came the message that changed everything. A LinkedIn DM from Veronica Langston. the lead investor at Tallspire Ventures, the person who signed off on that $10 million round. Mr. Ford, I believe we need to talk. I was unaware of the full technical origin of the VoltEdge platform. I would greatly appreciate a confidential conversation at your convenience. No strings, just clarity. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I called Tessa. She wants answers, I said. Give her the truth, Tessa replied. On your terms. The meeting with Veronica happened 2 days later at a private co-working space in downtown Palo Alto. She was composed, surgical in her questions, but clearly furious beneath the surface. Brandon positioned himself as the architect, she said. Our firm wouldn't have greenlit the round if we'd known the technical core came from a single uncredited engineer. I nodded. That core isn't even theirs to use anymore. My compression engine predates my employment. I only adapted it, on paper, for their product. And you can prove that? I reached into my bag, handed her a USB drive. Get repos, time-stamped, and emails, including the one where I told Brandon about it. He waved it off as irrelevant detail. Veronica reviewed the files briefly. Her jaw tightened. This is bad, she said. Very bad. We made a decision based on a lie. And now your $10 million is built on technology that may soon go dark. She nodded slowly. We're calling an emergency board meeting. You'll be invited. I paused. I'm not doing this for revenge. Good, she replied. Do it for control. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because of some fantasy of Brandon getting fired, though I won't lie, that didn't sound terrible. But because the truth was beginning to surface. The foundation they buried me under was crumbling. I wasn't pulling strings from the shadows. I was simply removing the illusion. The illusion that they could steal brilliance and replace it with branding. That illusion was dying, and I intended to bury it myself. The board meeting was set for Monday morning. Veronica made it clear. This wasn't just about performance concerns. It was about ethics, transparency, and possible misrepresentation of IP ownership. I didn't wear a suit. I wore what I always wore when I built the foundation of VoltEdge: jeans, a black t-shirt, and the same old sneakers I'd worn since the first alpha release. Let them see who really created the engine they were so desperate to salvage. The meeting room at VoltEdge's HQ looked exactly as I remembered it. All glass walls, exposed steel beams, and cold brew on tap. But the vibe had shifted entirely. Everyone looked tense. Brandon sat at the far end of the table, jaw locked, hands clasped too tightly. He didn't greet me. Veronica began. We're here to clarify the origins and ownership of the compression technology that powers VoltEdge's platform. Mr. Ford has agreed to present his evidence. Brandon, you will have the opportunity to respond after. I stepped up to the monitor and plugged in the USB stick. This, I said, pulling up a repository, is the original compression engine, code dated nearly 2 years before I joined VoltEdge, created independently in my own time under a private developer license. The design structure, the logic model, even the encryption gate, all mine. I moved to the next slide. These emails, I continued, show me informing Brandon about the framework. His response was dismissive but clear. As long as it works, don't bore me with code history. There were a few stifled coughs. Next, I showed the differences between the original code and what's currently running on VoltEdge servers. Adapted, yes, but the core hasn't changed, and without understanding this core, every patch your engineers attempt will destabilize the architecture, which is what's happening now. I stepped back, silent. Veronica turned to Brandon. Brandon? He cleared his throat, eyes darting toward the door like he wanted to escape. Felix is overstating his role. The system was a team effort. He didn't do it alone. You had 3 weeks to stabilize it after firing him, Veronica said flatly. It's only gotten worse. The customer complaints, the outages, they've multiplied. So either you underestimated Felix's role, or you misrepresented it. Joseph, the VP of engineering, finally spoke up. Brandon told us Felix's compression layer was replaceable. We've learned that was incorrect. No one can even trace the function chaining in his module without triggering recursive failures. He was essential. Still is. There it was. The word they all avoided for weeks. Essential. Veronica turned to me. What do you want? I looked at her, then at Brandon. I want my name restored. I want the truth published, that this tech was built by me. I want ownership of the original IP acknowledged, and I want Brandon out of any technical leadership role. Immediately. Brandon shot up from his seat. You're blackmailing the board? No, I said calmly. I'm offering a choice, clarity or collapse. You decide. 2 hours later, the board returned after a private vote. Veronica stood, no expression on her face. Effective immediately, Brandon is removed from his CEO position. He will retain a non-executive founder title with no operational control. Interim CEO will be assigned within the week. I didn't look at Brandon. I didn't need to. Felix, she continued, we offer you the role of Chief Technology Architect, full ownership rights to your original framework, and a licensing deal for continued platform use, with royalties. You will also receive equity retroactively aligned with the Series A valuation. I nodded. And the public correction? It will go out tomorrow morning. And the team? I asked. Do they know the truth? They will, Joseph said. I'll make sure of it. That night, I sat alone on the patio of my apartment, watching the city lights blink like failing server nodes. I hadn't set out for revenge, but I got something better. Recognition. Control. The freedom to decide what came next. Not as someone tossed aside, but as someone who built something no one else could replicate. Voltage could now survive, but only because the person they thought was disposable turned out to be irreplaceable. And they'd never forget that again. 3 weeks after the board meeting, I officially stepped into my new role as Chief Technology Architect. The first order of business was stabilizing the system and reassuring clients. I didn't do it alone. I called Ethan, Zane, and a few others into a private Slack channel called Rebuild. They weren't just engineers. They were survivors, people who had watched leadership fumble and were ready to build with purpose again. You're the reason the engine runs, Zane told me during our first rebuild session. I'm just glad someone finally noticed. With my guidance, the platform's load time dropped by 32% within a week. More importantly, we rewrote the documentation. Together. Not in isolation, not as gatekeeping, but as a shared language the team could follow and expand upon. Because I wasn't here to be a gatekeeper anymore. I was here to be a builder, a teacher, a foundation. But the ghosts of Brandon's leadership still lingered. Customer success reps were still fielding angry calls. Investors were on edge. And Veronica warned me that another board meeting was scheduled. This time, with pressure mounting to replace the entire executive team. We need a strategy, she told me. You've proven your value. Now show them your vision. So I did. I presented a 3-phase plan for Voltage. 1. Rebuild stability, patch the system, modernize the framework, and re-architect the outdated segments Brandon insisted were good enough. 2. Public trust, host open-source community events, publish white papers on our tech, prove we had nothing to hide. 3rd, legacy replacement, fully sunset Brandon's strategic decisions, recenter the company on innovation, not ego. Veronica leaned back in her chair after my presentation. It's strong, bold, but it hinges on you. A week later, we launched the first live update since I returned. It was smooth. No crashes. No client outages. The internal dev forum flooded with thank yous. That same night, I got a message from Leah. "Whatever you're doing, it's working. People finally feel like they have a leader again." But it wasn't about being the leader. It was about never again letting people confuse charisma for competence. Then came something I didn't expect. An email from Brandon. "Felix, I know I messed up. Badly. I saw the white paper draft. It's incredible. You've always been the soul of this thing. I wish I'd seen it sooner. I don't expect anything, but I do want to apologize." I stared at the screen for a while. Then, I typed, "Appreciate the message. No hard feelings, but let's be clear. This company survived in spite of you, not because of you. Best of luck moving forward." I didn't send it to be cruel. I sent it to draw the line between past and future. 2 months after I returned, Voltage announced a major partnership with Novasys, a major data streaming company. The deal hinged on our compression protocol. My protocol. The press release included my name, title, and technical attribution. For the first time, I wasn't a shadow behind the scenes. I was the headline, and I earned it, not through vengeance, but through staying ready, through knowing that even when you're dismissed, silenced, or erased, the truth, if documented well enough, becomes undeniable. Voltage survived, but the real victory, so did I. 6 months after I was fired, and 6 months after I returned, Voltage was unrecognizable. The company that once ran on panic and posturing now ran on transparency and teamwork. We'd rebuilt the platform from its bones, with engineers who had once been terrified now confidently proposing upgrades, pushing branches, and leading their own initiatives. Every line of code had a signature, and every voice had a place at the table. At the quarterly town hall, I stood at the front of the company, not behind a screen this time, but as a leader people chose to follow. "This platform was born out of innovation," I told the staff. "It nearly died from ego, but it's thriving again because we chose clarity over comfort and truth over titles." The applause was genuine, not polite, not staged. I looked out at faces I once thought I'd never see again. Ethan, Leah, Zane. People who had stuck around, not because they had to, but because they finally believed in what we were building. The board chair approached me after the meeting. "Investors are pleased. Novasys is already testing beta integrations, and we've had 3 new firms reach out since last week." "And the media?" I asked. "They're loving the architect returns to save the empire angle," she said, smirking. "You might be a folk hero in the startup world now." I laughed. It wasn't fame I'd sought, just fairness. Recognition doesn't always mean praise. Sometimes it just means being seen. Then, one Friday afternoon, a letter arrived at my office. A real one. Not an email, not a Slack ping, but a folded sheet of cream paper in a blue envelope. It was from Brandon. "Felix, I've started over. New city, new venture. But I wanted you to know, I've learned more in the last 6 months than I ever did in the 5 years running Voltage. I was wrong about you. I let insecurity blind me to the value of what you built and who you were. And I know an apology doesn't fix what I did, but I'm offering it anyway. Whatever comes next for me, I hope I can build it with half the integrity you've shown." Brandon. I didn't need to write back. The apology wasn't mine to manage. But I did feel something shift. Not forgiveness, exactly, but closure. He finally saw me. Too late to matter for him, but not for me. 1 year to the day after I was let go, I published an article on Medium, not about revenge, not even about what had happened. It was about resilience. Why every founder needs a builder they can't replace. It went viral in the tech world. Dozens of CTOs reached out. Podcasts invited me. VCs asked if I wanted to start something new. But I wasn't chasing the spotlight. I was building a legacy. Not one built on lawsuits or takeovers, but on architecture. The kind you can't delete with a personnel file or replace with a consultant. The kind that outlasts power plays and press releases. The kind that, once built right, becomes the blueprint for everything that follows. So yeah, the CEO fired me after I handed him the key to $10 million in funding. But he forgot one thing. I wasn't just the coder. I was the cornerstone. And you can't rebuild the house without the foundation. Not unless you want the whole thing to come crashing down.